Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spaying the Need. Tonight, I have a special guest who is in the business just like I am, but on a bigger scale. His name is Joe Danyi, owner of Youngstown Studio. I hope I did not butcher your name.
You did, but so does everybody else, so we're good. It
That's
is Danyi.
Danny. Oh, that's Joe Danyi. I like that.
There you go.
And we talk about that. You're almost kind of exploding right now with your Youngstown Studio, and kind of we'll talk a little bit about that here down the road. But kind of tell us kind of how you got started and how you are and got up to where you are now with Youngstown Studio.
Sure. So my philosophy has always been, and doesn't matter if we're talking about computers, tech, education, whatever, is I usually will take people and sort of put a machine or a technology or an ability in front of them and sort of help draw out of them some, something imaginative, an idea or something that can be manifested in the real world. So this is sort of an extension of that where, you have all of these thoughts and ideas that are bubbling around in people's head. And it's tough to, especially in a social media world, to stand out and to differentiate between all of the other opinions and ideas that are floating around.
Well, and we talk about that you're the owner of Youngstown Computer, if I'm correct.
Yep.
And kind of how did you kind of go from Youngstown Computer to Youngstown Studio?
Well, you kind of interact with the same kind of technology, but rather than sort of using it as a practitioner, you're using it as sort of like a technician. And so just reversing it on the other side is, you figure out what all the many ways you can use a computer. And then same thing with a microphone. You can hook a microphone up and get it to sound right and connect it with other people. But then if you're the person in front of the microphone, it's a whole nother world.
What made you come up with the idea of Youngstown Studio and where it is today and how that all started?
Well, I was a big fan of talk radio, and I was addicted to, the different hosts and the different perspectives that they brought. So then it was obvious that podcasting became sort of a second iteration of that. But instead of it being gatekeepered where you had to be part of a, corporate entity in order to get your voice heard, literally anybody could sit in front of a microphone and do it. So I just kind of fell in love with the radio format that then went into the podcasting format.
And kind of what was your thought when you first thought of this Youngstown Studio? You're like, I got this great idea that I should do something like this. Now, was it like, well, I don't know. Or was it like, you know what? That's not a bad idea to what's going on in the world.
This thing just existed on a piece of paper for a lot of years. And it wasn't even, I didn't even do anything with it except for it existing on that paper. I was going to open an office downtown and it was just going to be an extension of my, the technical services from Youngstown Computer. But when they asked me to sign the lease, I hesitated for a minute. And rather than put it in Youngstown Computer's name, I just took the plunge and decided to put this in Youngstown Studio's name. And it was kind of weird at the time because Youngstown Studio wasn't doing anything. There was no activity, but I figured that would be the best way to get it moving, is to have a nameplate on the door that said Youngstown Studio. And I needed to make Youngstown Studio exist.
That sounds like an interesting story because you hear a lot of spontaneous changes, like, you know what, I'm not going to put it in Youngstown Computer's name, I'm going right to the studio. So I can only imagine what was going through your head after you signed the document, like, okay, what am I doing?
Yeah, and it became sort of this lab where if I had some new ideas, it was like a great place to test it out, because when you open an office, it kind of takes on the form of whatever goes on there. And this office didn't have a form to be able to take on. It's literally anything I felt like doing. So in the first part, it was a meeting space, and then maybe I did some of my own commercial recordings, and then I really started feeding into it until it became what it is now. And I have like 4 studios in this office now.
Now, where is Youngstown? So many people, how podcasts are, they can be ran either out of their house or out of an office. Where is Youngstown Studio located?
So we're downtown in the Commerce Building across from the YMCA. And it's a famous building, or an infamous building downtown. It's beautiful. So if I've never ventured downtown, it would be check things out. It's a really cool place.
And I'm familiar with Youngstown, been around a long time. Youngstown has really changed over the last, I would say, decade, with a lot of things happening. What made you move downtown for office space, or just with the sentiment of Youngstown Studio?
So and it was sort of like a running joke because I started Youngstown Computer, and sort of the business philosophy, my naming convention for naming businesses are where you located and what do you do? And so Youngstown Computer came to fruition because that's where I operated out of Youngstown, and that's what I did. But I never had an office that was actually in Youngstown. So I had this name of Youngstown always in my business names and never having an office. So I said, you know what, one of these times I'm going to open an office or a business, and I got to fetch something that's actually in Youngstown. And that's how it came to be.
So you have 4 studios, you
Yes.
said, downtown. How long you been there?
July. I've been here 2 years. 2 years in July.
And what have you seen success-wise? Have you seen I'd say a low growth that then you've kind of picked up, or have you seen a tremendous growth in your business pre-pandemic? Let me put it to you that way.
Oh yeah, huge growth, and in fact, we've sort of even got pent up demand that we're slowly growing this. We're on the studio side, we probably got a waiting list of maybe 30 hosts that want to do podcasting, and since we're doing audience development, we're kind of developing each one of the hosts we already have to a level we're happy with, and before we start bringing on new hosts to do the same thing. And even on the technology side, things have grown, especially the demand of like everybody's working from home and needs, laptops and cameras and stuff like that to do things virtually. So everything has grown on a perfect pace with what we're able to provide.
So now let's talk about pandemic.
Yes.
So we're now in pandemic. We're still in it. We're almost been a year. I would say over a year. How has the pandemic changed kind of the philosophy that you guys have done, or have you stayed kind of on course to what you've been planning?
We have a lot of projects that are sort of pivot ready, and so it allowed us to take on some things that if things would have stayed the same, we would have probably not been working on. And everything has been a blessing on our side. Not that I, would wish anything like it happened, but we really not just weathered this thing out, but I think we became a lot stronger because it happened.
And have you grown during the pandemic? Because now, like you mentioned, people are at home, people are on their computers more. Do they like being at home? Probably. Do they like having a Zoom call 7 hours a day? That's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. So how do you kind of balance that with your podcasts and some of your video podcasts to kind of elevate that type of level?
Well, and think about it, like if people are at home, they're consuming everything different than they used to. I mean, it's one thing to be at home doing your work and being able to pick up, and stream your content over your computer versus when you're at work where, you got listening ears and you don't want to disturb people. So I think the demand went through the roof on anything that we provide, whether or not be an outlet for hosts to do it, where people obviously have more time and more exposure to it, and the consumption of it on the listening end went through the roof. So I don't think we lost in any department.
Well, I see, and I've kind of looked at some different research from you and some of what you guys are doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys have actually grown in programs since the pandemic started, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, we probably got every month I take on a new potential, like I'll pilot a new program. And like I said, we got a backlog of 30 programs that they want to do them on the air. And so there's a huge demand for it.
Well, let's talk about what are some of the programs that you offered pre-COVID that you now offer now?
Okay. So my theory was that I don't want to just do one type of programming. I didn't want to, what happens on talk radio is it's mostly just political, because political is the easiest to sell, get listeners.
And it's 5 hours long, and people kind of get you have a very small niche.
Yes. And so I wanted to make it varied where, I like that these niche groups of the over specialized were popular in social media channels. I mean, you can do I don't know, obscure thing, and you're going to attract people who also do that obscure thing too. So that's what I wanted to build it around. So we were able to put together a podcast about sports. That was a no-brainer. And a podcast with rock and roll, and Freddie does that rock and roll and cultural stuff in Youngstown. We do have one political show. We're doing like a shopping and sort of vintage stuff program. We have one for women's culture. I mean, so I'm kind of picking a different thing every time because those are the specializations and the interests that are coming through my door. I don't think I could have handpicked it any better, though. I'm kind of glad that I just didn't load up on one specialization, because I think that would be harder to pitch.
Well, and I think looking at your schedule and looking at past, you have a very diverse programming, almost like a TV channel, a CBS or an ABC, where you have the news, you have this, you have Fast Freddy doing the old school stuff, and like you mentioned earlier, what has been some of the best programs that you would have not thought of that actually are becoming popular?
So I guess the first one that we started, my pastor and I, we started the Joe and Doug Show, and it was literally just talking about like things we've been through and how the challenges we face and how we've overcome them. And the first show was like a self-development one. And we did probably a year's worth of that without ever publishing it, because we were sort of practicing how we would, help people, do turnaround stories and whatever. And that one, I would have never guessed it, but of all the popularity and the viewership and the interactions and the actual change that we've made because of it, we've helped a ton of people just with that one type of broadcast. I'm kind of proud of that one, because I think we inflicted a little bit of social change with the people who interacted with the program.
And that's good, because I think during the times that we're going through right now, it's very difficult with mental health and social distancing and not doing much of anything. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that me and my wife and I have not done much of, we'll go to the grocery store, we may go get something to eat and bring it back home, because I think people may call it a hoax or whatever they call it, but people are dying, and it's a bad thing. And I think those types of good stories help.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think we'll even feel, the repercussions from that for years, as, relationships suffer, and we're quick on the draw, and we're canceling things left and right. And I think that just has such a huge ill effect down the road.
Well, and I know that we talk about a variety of different aspects of a pandemic, health workers, essential workers. And you look at that some people are saying that we may not get back to full time till 2022 or 2023 because of it, almost like what the Spanish flu does, if they're referencing that. So how does your channel help with that encouragement down the road?
Yeah, and we talk through those things on a very granular level, and because it's happened to all of us. We used me as an example. I'm kind of an introvert, so I was always trying to escape sort of like run-ins and conversations that weren't absolutely necessary, and I'd bow out of parties early. That was just me. That was who I was. And then after a year of this, I found myself the other day just finding a total stranger, engaging in totally meaningless conversation, and I needed it so bad that I hung around way longer than I would have before. And I think when you use me sort of as the punching bag for what we're going through, we can kind of learn like how we're all adapting to it, and how we know it's a big problem, and what we're doing to not conceding to it, but still thriving in spite of it.
Well, and I know that you have some other programs out there that actually give a sense of normalcy, we hope, in some capacity. Talk about some of those programs that many people may not know that are making an actual impact in some capacity.
Yeah, and I would say like the distraction thing. We've always had a really good relationship with using sports as a distraction and entertainment as a distraction. And I think that's pretty, important to be able to keep some normalcy. Like, the worst thing that could have happened is if there would have been no college sports, no college football, no basketball, because it's where a ton of our time is invested in following our favorite players. And if that would have just disappeared, that would have been a huge void. in our lives. But I guess being able to see, like, this is stuff like you mentioned that you'd expect to see on normal programming. You see your sports, you see your, cultural importance, and it feels like it's a normal day when you're going through this. It's not like I kind of, COVID always makes its way into the programming because it's just a fact that we're dealing with, but it doesn't seem like it is too much become our identity. We're doing this stuff in spite of COVID and how it affects us.
How has, and I'll go back, how has COVID affected your operations at all? I know because 10 feet, 6 feet apart, you have a lot of guests in the studios, or like we're doing now, how has that kind of affected operations in regards to guests or topics that you're talking about?
Yeah, we have some people who, they feel safe to do in person. So we kind of just take precautions, cleaning everything down, keeping everybody separated. Since we have 4 studios, we're able to take groups and split them between multiple studios. And then, like we're doing here, is the video conferencing has become totally critical in this whole thing. A lot of people used to, bridge the gaps of being really far away and having these things. Now somebody down the road, like, Jim Trestle's literally up the road, and we were able to have an interview with him that he wouldn't have otherwise been able to do.
And I think that helps because with busy schedules, this would have never happened if the pandemic happened. We'd be still doing the in-person interviews, I'm sorry, I'm busy, I can't make it down to your studio, because that's a 20-minute drive or a 10-minute drive plus. So this kind of back-to-back type of interviews helps. And kind of talk about, you do video and audio, is that correct, for your programs? Talk about that and how you guys do it.
Sure. So there's three platforms that have huge amount of users: YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And so we'll package our podcast in a video setting where we have the cameras and we have the lighting and backdrops and whatnot. And then so we'll drop it on those platforms because they do really well that way. But podcasting has its own, sort of method of consuming. And so we'll package it as an audio version of it. So like our hosts, we have to sort of build in content that works well on the video side. But if something's on the screen, it needs to be narrated and described to the people who can't, see the visuals. So that's really the only complication, is that there are going to be some things that work its way into the video side that don't really play nice on the audio side.
And what kind of are your plans moving forward? What are you looking at? Well, unfortunately, I think some people are just staying month to month, but what are some of your goals moving forward with Youngstown Studio? What do you want it to be?
So we on sort of like day one after I came up with Youngstown Studio, where I can actually make the stuff, I also came up with a channel 330, and it works just like a television deal. So it was a way to use whatever program content and put it in a way like had 24-hour programming. So if you went to channel 330's YouTube channel, it would basically be something you could put on your TV and just allow it to keep playing 24 hours a day. And then programming would be dropped in the live stream, so that maybe some of the older people that are more familiar with that's how things work have a way of, consuming the stuff that we're creating down here. And then after that, getting a mechanism that would make it an analog to regular TV, like maybe an app that had, content that we created here distributed through like something like YouTube, but the app would be, a remote friendly way of getting to this stuff.
What's your end goal with everything?
So, I started the computer company. This is kind of weird to even describe, but I saw how computers were being distributed. And I was looking for sort of a weakness and a void. And I found that anybody who was over 50 years old, they didn't want to learn anything new, and they hated this computer thing. And
yep, they did. That's still today.
And so I pointed at them and I said, that's the group I'm going to go after. And so I started a Youngstown Computer Show on 570 WKBN. And the whole goal was to answer questions to people and you make language that allowed vulnerable people to walk up to the phone, say something, and not feel stupid because they asked the question. So we didn't use terminology that was over anybody's head or concepts over their head. And we got a whole group of people to sort of buy into technology that otherwise I'd already sworn it off. So I'm kind of using that same philosophy where, people who know how to use podcasts and find podcasts already found the podcast that they like. And I'm not necessarily going after that group. I obviously will get to them, but I want to go after a group where has no, they basically don't even know that this world exists, and trying to make it easy enough where they can warm up to it and start grazing content in the same way that the younger generation does right now.
What are some of the programs that are coming down the pipeline that you're going to be showcasing over the next 6 months that people can, almost like a teaser, you can give the people of what's coming?
Okay, so I opened another company a couple months ago that it's called Youngstown Makerspace. And basically I took a room and I filled it with equipment, like 3D printers and vinyl printers and laser engravers, kilns, and pretty much stuff that you could use to make other stuff. And the premise of the business is I'm going to take people who don't already know how to use that stuff, but invite them to come in and use their hands and feel their way through and learn how to use these machines. So I put like real world equipment in front of people, and then I demonstrate and teach how to use that equipment. So that's the overall philosophy, is I'm going to basically take people without having to go to a technical school, how to, go to college for these things, and be able to instruct. And I want to bring out sort of like the imagination in people, and sometimes giving these raw materials and this stuff that allows you to do stuff, putting it in front of them. And, there might be a radio host that's brilliant, won't go to, broadcasting school, but if I give them a microphone and I give them a stage, that might come out of them, and we might create, amazing people, providers of content.
Well, yeah, that's a good point, because there are some people that showcase in a certain specific talent, but really never went to school for it.
Exactly.
And you look at it as, what did I do for 10 years? I should have a PhD. Isn't it? Like, you go to school more than 8 years, you should have a PhD.
Right. Exactly.
Called a doctor.
Yeah. So if you look at everything that we're doing here, it's more school than it is, business. We're just going to create a whole lot of people and give them skills that they didn't have before. And we're going to team up with them and put a lot of stuff into the marketplace. And it's just going to be fun overall.
Well, it sounds like you're well on your way, and I appreciate you taking time. And I know you got a busy schedule as it is. And one thing, let me end with this. What are your goals? And I know I asked this a little bit, but what are some of your things you're working on now that not many people know?
Good question. I think, because of the new, I know one that we didn't bring up. We're putting together a shopping network. We partnered with a marketing genius and a guy that just knows procurement like it's nobody's business. And he said what Youngstown needs is a local shopping channel. Where not only is it a place, that you can entice buyers there, but it's made up of products that are produced here in Youngstown. And so that gives sort of like a new venue for people who make stuff here locally that, maybe they're fighting to get into normal distribution in grocery stores and on retail shelves. But if I create a store that, sort of like highlights local producers, and then I invite the public to support local producers, I think that has an outcome that'll benefit us, them, and everyone.
That's an interesting thought. A shopping channel in Youngstown.
Yeah.
We'll be looking forward to that. Joe, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. At the end of each podcast, I like to ask some fun questions. Are you interested?
Let's do it.
Okay. So the answer, there's no right or wrong answer. It could be something personal or professional. It's either or. What's your best accomplishment?
I would have to say 100% my kid. And I know that sounds cheesy, but
no, not at all.
But I'm telling you, like I went into, I wanted to make give him chances that I never had, and give him a head start that I never had. And I tell you, that's the most I'm proud of, is I've invested time in family over, the business, and really I feel like I'm doing an amazing job. So there it is.
And your hopefully your child will follow in your footsteps to continue the tradition.
There you go.
Best memory.
Best memory.
Yeah, these are harder questions than the ones I asked you earlier.
Yeah, really. Best memory. I did marketing for a NASCAR team back in the 90s. And I can remember being at the Daytona 500, standing behind the pit stall. And yeah, I was, fledgling new company, not a whole lot of money. And I felt like, being there sort of said that, I've made this into something that's real. So best memory there.
Okay. What's your best experience? Got to make you think on these.
Yeah, really. And I don't want to take an easy out. I want to come up with something profound. So give me.
I've had people. No, yeah, that's fine. I've had people that come up with interesting thoughts and answers on all of these questions, and people, I don't tell them ahead of time. They usually watch the podcasts and watch the ending, so they try to figure it out.
Okay.
And I change it up at times.
Okay. Well, here, best experience, I guess the most rewarding experience was we became sort of minority investors in other small startups. I felt like the impact that we had on helping somebody who was in our position previously was the most rewarding, because we got to give them hope and give them new outs and give them more resources. So that was probably the best.
Okay. Who's your role model?
Role model. I had a couple, and I call them more mentors than role models. But what I did was I would go out in the marketplace and then pick somebody who's doing something I wanted to do, and I would just emulate them. And so I really can't give him a name. I had one of my early mentors. His name is Vince, and he was really good at the packaging of presents, whereas one of those people walk into a room and everybody kind of notices them. And I pulled that out of his personality. But I kind of became assembled for a whole bunch of those people.
Okay. Now this question tricks some people, but don't take it as it is.
Okay.
If there was one person you would want to meet, past or present, who would it be and why? Okay,
it's Nikola Tesla. And I've been reading about him and studying him, and I'm sort of at the altar of Nikola Tesla. And so I think that he had things that were locked up in his brain that he never got to share with the world. And one day I'm going to pick up where he left off and maybe bring some of those inventions to fruition.
Okay. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
I did. This was awesome. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me tonight, Joe. It's always a pleasure. We'll check in. You're more than welcome to be on this podcast anytime in the future. We'll check up on you, see how everything's going, and we'll make sure that we can help you in any way we can.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight on Spanning the Need. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel or check us out for podcasts and announcements at anthonyvspano.com. Everyone, have a good night and God bless.